Here we go. I'm gonna put that there. Right. So, what have you been up to the past few weeks? Apparently, you've been on holiday, have you? Where you been? Yeah, go on.
Was either caravan or watching movies, games and stuff.
Yeah, down the counter. Do you know your end's a bit laggy as well?
Is it?
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit out. So, but you can hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's all right then. Right, we're going to do two things today. We're going to do one that you'll be familiar with, right? And we'll do something else that you're not familiar with. And I got new bit of technology I want to do today. So, if I mention the Mongols, right, what do I mean?
The Mongols.
Yeah, but what am I talking about?
They're in China or something, aren't they?
Bingo, like it. Good facts. Right, so what we need to do is Mongolia, and we need to go to a guy called Genghis Khan. He's actually called, he's called Genghis Khan. No, it's written as Genghis with a G, but it's Genghis, right? So if you want to look this up, it's Gen rather than J, right? And it's a bit many things in history, right? One person says one thing, and somebody else says that there is something else, right? So if you listen, this present war in Ukraine, some people call it Kiev and other people call it Kiev. Yeah, have you heard that?
No.
Yeah, it's like the Russians call it Kiev and the Ukrainians call it Kiev. And it gets really confusing, right? But it's a bit like your dad will know this, right? He obviously goes up to Shrewsbury, but some people call it Shrewsbury, right? So Genghis is like different ways of saying it, and you'll also be familiar with Leominster, which is Leicester. So sometimes in history things sound differently than they're written, and some people call them one thing and other people call them another. So what I want us to do is have a look at a few images. Now I've got some new technology today, so I don't know if it's going to work. Right, I'm just gonna see if we can do this, and it's still coming across okay, yeah? Sound wise.
Yeah.
Good. Right. Okay.
You're lagging a bit now.
Is this showing on the screen now? What's to see this on?
Mongols and King Arthur.
Yes. And look at this video. It's great. So basically, the Mongol Empire began in where modern day Mongolia is, and Genghis Khan spread his empire all over this area. It's huge, isn't it? It like contains China and Russia and basically all of that bit of Asia. In fact, Genghis Khan conquered probably the best part of a fifth of the world. It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm still assuming when it says Mongols and King Arthur.
Ah, right. Because what it is, we're going to do a bit of King Arthur as well. because your dad's very keen on you learning local stuff, right? But I wanted you to do other stuff, so I just thought we would just chuck in King Arthur at the end, okay? There's nothing wrong with that, is there? I'm sure your dad would be impressed. Anyway, so what we've got there is we've got this huge empire, and it's like that for about 100 years, and then it slowly starts to fall apart, like most empires do. Evan, tell me a few empires that happened and then disappeared. Give me 2 examples.
British Empire.
But how long did the British Empire last for? Well, how long?
200 years, I don't know.
Yeah, that's about right, actually. Well, it's a difficult one, to be honest with you, because the British Empire started to happen when we took over. Then we lost North America in 1776. Well, 1782, depending, because they had the Declaration of Independence, didn't they, in 1776? No, and then some people say that the British Empire. Yeah, the thing is that I do believe that the Queen is still, the leader of Canada, but it's not actually part of the empire because we don't actually rule over it. So when people talk about the British Empire, they talk about the empire disappearing when we lost India in 1947. Because when you look at the map, we lost India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, which was a big bit of our empire. But Genghis Khan's empire, Genghis Khan only lived for about 20 odd years after he was like roaming across this landscape, right? And then other generations took over his empire, right? So I've got some facts I want to share with you, and let's go for it. There he is. Does that guy look familiar to you?
I'm still seeing like where it says Mongols and King Arthur.
Oh, you're still seeing it, are you? All right, then let's just what I'm going to do. All right, I didn't know you were still seeing that. Oh, Christ. Anyway, let's just see what we can do. Let's just go back with that. Okay. Oh, start. Go. Start. And let's just see what we can do. Right. All right. Just see. Go back on you. And can you see that now?
Yeah. Wow.
Is it growing?
Yeah.
This is the empire as it grows.
I did it go into different colors.
That is when in 1294 it divided into four different kingdoms. So it's like the great grandchildren of Genghis Khan. So one of the great grandchildren of Genghis Khan took over all of China, which was the biggest bit, and you had then somebody taken over like
India.
Iran, and yeah. Well, no, they never really ruled over India. But the empire that they actually came across that was bigger than them for a while was actually Russia, which was actually known as Rus, R-U-S. And the biggest people trying to stop the Mongols and Genghis Khan were in fact the Russians, known as Rus, R-U-S. And I think you probably already know that the Russians actually descended from the Vikings. One of the most influential people in history were in fact the Vikings. Because the Vikings gave us the Normans, and they gave us the Russians, and they gave us the leaders of France, and all of Scandinavia, and obviously conquering Britain as well. So let's have another little look at an image. There he is. Are you looking at an image of Genghis Khan?
Yeah, he's got a beard, doesn't he?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. That's Genghis Khan. And Evan, does that look very familiar to your dad?
No.
I think it is. Ask your dad, right? Is your dad still bald?
Yeah.
Well, if you tell your dad to grow a beard like that and put an earring in, it'd look like your dad.
Huh.
I reckon it could.
Maybe.
Yeah. I reckon I could look like your dad. Anyway, right, here's some key facts about the Mongols. Little known facts about the Mongols. Is this showing on your screen?
Yeah.
Good. Little known facts about the Mongols. So the Mongols had an empire that stretched over 33 million square kilometers, which is a huge area, as we've actually just seen. Now, this is really interesting. The Mongol Empire managed to rise to prominence and fall within the span of about 100 years. Now, you mentioned earlier on the British Empire lasted about 200 years. So probably that's about right, actually. But in all honesty, yeah, we most of the British Empire was part of was big chunk of Africa, and we didn't actually conquer most big chunks of Africa until and start again until 1878, and most of those bits of Africa started to disappear by about the 1960s, right? So we could say that the biggest bit of the British Empire was only for about 60, 70 years. Yeah, with India and Africa and Canada. So in many ways, the Mongol Empire is a little bit like the British Empire. It didn't last a massive length of time. But the Roman Empire, when you think about the Roman Empire,
lasted for ages.
Yeah. It lasted for ages, right? Because we've done the Romans loads of times. So the Roman Empire began 753 years BC, right? Well, it was a little village, wasn't it? It was a little bunch of lads called Romulus and Remus, right? And they beat each other up, and Remus died and Romulus took over, right? Anyway, so and then the empire lasted. The western bit lasted until 476, and then the Roman Empire itself continued until Mehmed the Great besieged Constantinople in Turkey, modern day Istanbul, and we've done that, and that eventually fell in 1453. So you are right. One of the longest empire, in fact, probably the longest empire ever in history was the Roman Empire. Yeah, you're right. So there is one similarity. I don't know if you mention this word to your dad, Pax Romana, right? He will know what you mean. Well, we'll explain what that means by looking at Pax Mongolia. So it says here, the Mongols are largely known for their cruelty, but they actually fostered in an era of peace, known historically as Pax Mongolia or the Mongolian peace. Do you know the way this worked, Evan, right? Was if you, right, say for example, right, yeah? Say for example, the Mongols were around today. And the people of Ferndale said, come in, Mongolians, right? You can use Lidl's down the road, right? And you can build a train line, right? Because your dad would be really good at train line in the Ferndale Valley, right? And it's like, and we're going to trade with you and we're going to be nice to you, right? The Mongols will be happy with that. Yeah. It's known as the Pax Mongolia, right? But in the other valley opposite you, right? In the Rhondda Mauer, yeah, the big Rhondda, right? Where there's Porth and Treorchy and Treurba, right? Yeah. And they decided to resist the Mongols, and then the Mongols would set light to the whole valley, right, and burn everything, kill everyone, right, and that would be what would happen, because the people in the other valley, right, weren't friendly towards the Mongolians, and they would kill everyone. Yeah. So if you've got any friends in the Porth in that valley where Porth is and Rorke and Tonopandi is, right, if you've got any friends there, right, and they decide to fight the Mongols, they'd all be dead. That's what they did. So in other words, what the Mongols said was, if you do what we tell you to do, right, you live, right, but if you say no, if you fight us, we're going to kill you all. And that's what they did.
Say if like we had 2 people resist and the rest of them like are fine. Do they only kill 2 people or do they kill all of them?
Well, actually, there's a good thing about this, right? That's a really interesting question, right? So let's go back to the time of the Mongolians, right? If say Kiev, yeah, the city of Kiev, right? They reached Kiev, yeah, that was a city back then, right? And they resisted the Mongolians. Now, I don't really know what happened there, right? Because I'm just using this as an example. But if the people, if 2 of the people in Kiev decided to say, right, we're going to tell you to fight the Mongolians, and they all say, no, we don't want to fight the Mongolians. You fight the Mongolians, right? You're going to do what we tell you to do, right? The Mongolians would kill you all because you're listening to the people in charge. But if you decided to kill the 2 people in charge, right, and say Mongolians come into our city, they would let you live. But there is another thing, right? There is another thing. Yeah. The Mongolians didn't like cities very much. And the reason why they didn't like cities very much is because when you get to about the 13...
No? Carl?
Right, there's lots of diseases about. Yes. If you said, you know, we'll do what you tell us to do, right, they might say leave the city, right, and they might set light to it and send you back into the city to live, right, because they wanted to get rid of disease. They were very much into disease. They didn't like disease, right? So you'd have to rebuild your city, right, that you get to live. Now that's a really interesting concept. Yeah. So if you said no to the Mongolians, they'd kill you. If you said yes, you have to do what they told you to do. Now this is a good one. I don't know if you've ever ridden on a horse, because I've never ridden on a horse at the age of 3. Yeah. Mongol children were trained to ride horses by the age of 3. Now, I'm not sure I can ride a horse. I've been on a... Yeah, at 3. Did you ever ride a horse at 3?
No.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
Yeah.
Did you find it difficult?
Yeah.
Well, Mongolian horses were smaller. Yeah. And it's likely because, you know, when you're a child, right, you fall over and you can like break things and they repair quickly. If you ride on a horse when you're really young, it's probably, you can learn how to ride a horse really well. Yeah. And it's very, very likely then that you're going to be okay. So this is why they trained children to ride on horses. Now, this is a really interesting fact. I think you're going to love this, right? Mongol horsemen may have invented ice cream. Interesting. They took cream in containers made from animal intestines on long journeys across the Gobi Desert in winter. So basically what they would do, they would kill an animal, right, eat all its flesh, and the big intestines, which is basically all the bodily fluid is and it comes out the other end, right? That's the intestines, right? So what would then happen is that what would then happen is that these can hang on, music, come on. And then what would happen is, as they galloped, the cream was vigorously shaken, so it moved up and down and all over the place, while the sub-zero temperature caused it to freeze. The expansion, and basically they do believe that with the milk, right, and they actually drank loads of different types of milk. They actually drank horse milk, right? I've never drunk an horse milk, but they actually... can I give you one other fact as well? We've gone away a minute, right? The first milk that humans ever drank was horse milk. The first animal probably domesticated before a cow was actually a horse. So they basically, I don't know if you know this, but if you need to create milk, right, from a cow or any animal, right, you need to make sure that that cow is pregnant and has another baby, right? And then the mother of that animal thinks it's feeding its babies, and then it produces more and more milk. And that's basically what you do to make sure it thinks that it's giving milk to babies. So that's how you get milk, right? So it's likely the horse, and lots of people needed horses back in the past, particularly well beyond the Mongolians. And it's likely the first horses were domesticated where the Mongolians are thousands of years before. So the expansion of the Mongolian Empire spread ice cream through China. And this is a guy, Marco Polo, reputedly brought the idea to Italy when he returned from his travels in 1295. Now, I don't know if this is true, right? But there's this guy, Marco Polo, went to China lots of times, yeah?
Yeah.
And when eventually on one of Marco Polo's later journeys, right, he recorded people were dying in China 20, 30 years before plague actually hit Europe, right? And he said, look, there's this horrible disease coming, right? And eventually plague hit Europe by 1546, 1547. Marco Polo knew about it years before. And you know, well, obviously we didn't prepare or anything like that. So ice cream, great. So let's just show you some images. Hang on a minute. We get this image here. Good. Got it? Can you see this image?
Yeah.
Right. Now, there's a number of different reasons why the Mongolians were so good in battle. Yeah. One, that they were aware of possible things like gunpowder, which they would have got from the Chinese. That's one point. The other point, well, actually, more importantly, was that they were really good at riding horses. They were very good at riding horses. After all, people were riding on horses before the age of 4, you know, as we've already said. What else was the other thing? When they went to different countries, they were able to take different weapons. So their whole army was equipped with various different weapons from various different kingdoms and various different empires. And when you've got various different weapons, if one weapon doesn't work, then you're able to use the other weapon. So this is a really good illustration because it shows that they're able to use, they've got horse archers, which is rather interesting, because the problem with the archer, as you're aware, is when you've got an archer, they don't really, most archers don't carry swords with them or spears, because, you know, they're carrying lots of, they're carrying maybe more than one bow with them, because if one breaks, they're carrying lots of arrows with them. Yeah, lots of arrows. Some archers are going to be carrying 10, 20, 30 arrows, lots of arrows. So they've got a lot to carry, it's a lot of wood. So the problem is with an archer has to stay in one spot, usually, in the Western idea of thinking of things. So you fire off your load, as you know, because you do actually fire your load, right? That hits the enemy, right? When you fired all your arrows, you've got nothing to defend yourself, and if the enemy's coming towards you, you're in deep trouble. But if you've got an archer who has also got a sword on top of a horse, you are invincible. You are quite a major figure in the battle. If you have a little look at this image, you can actually clearly see that guy in front, that infantryman's got something which is very similar to a billhook, right? That is a lethal weapon. We mentioned what a billhook is before. You've also got somebody with a shield and a sword there. So having a mixture of people able to fight is going to really muck up the enemy, because you know lots about war and so on, which is brilliant. Now, we also mentioned about Island Duana and Rorke's Drift. Now, Island Duana, that was going on in 1879, January 1879, actually. I'm pretty sure that was the date. And it's definitely 1879. And Island Duana, the British Army most of the soldiers didn't have swords. They just had their they just had their weapon and their bayonet. So when the enemy's upon you with a shield and an assegai is that little sort of small spear that with an iron tip on it, the enemy is going to be a lot more effective. So, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, the enemy is going to be more effective than you, because you can't really defend yourself because you can't fire at close quarters, right? So this is why the British Army was completely annihilated at Isla Duana, but they were very successful at Rorke's Drift. And as you know, Stanley Baker, the director and the actor in the film from 1964, he saw the importance of defense and making the film and all the rest of it. So that's a great film. And your dad knows all about that with Ferndale and with the choir at Llanwynno, which is nearby you anyway. Let's have another little look at an image. Now, there you go. Can you see this quite brutal image?
Yeah.
Now, this is more practical than being bloody. Now, in a battle, this is quite logical, right? Let's get a bit of a bill hook there, right? And he's got a bow, so he's got a bill hook, very similar to a bill hook there. He's got a bow there, so he's got two weapons, and he's got a sword, so he's got three weapons to defend himself, right? Archers don't have all this, normal archers, and nor do normal infantrymen. Knights, knights on a horse with their armor, they have a sword, or they might have a lance, maybe a shield, and that's it, right? They're not as maneuverable on the battlefield as this guy. Now, what we know in history is that, when on a battlefield at the end of the battle, you've got like 1,000 bodies in front of you. You've got one person counting the bodies and thinking, you've got 1 year, right? Okay. One there, and somebody else is coming along. Oh, we've got 1 year, right? The problem is with that is at the end of the battle, nobody knows how many people died. So what you simply do is you cut everybody's heads off and you put them in a pile. The problem is cutting people's heads off is you don't really know what side they're from. Right, so in that pile there's going to be Mongolian soldiers, and there's going to be other soldiers. And it mentioned earlier on, one fact that we didn't do earlier on was that fact there. The Mongols were actually outnumbered in most battles, but they usually won battles. So the reason why you'd collect their heads is to find out how many people died. And the problem when you cut off somebody's head, you don't know who it is. Right, you don't know which side they fought on, but hey, by piling up the heads, you can say, "Look, I've killed all these people." You don't tell the enemy that you're fighting that some of those heads are actually from your own men, right? Shh! Don't tell them that big secret, right? So it might seem that the battle was much more of a victory, right, than you're making out. But we see this in many campaigns, many in ancient Egypt, when they would fight and the ancient Egyptians may be victorious, they might go to somebody, say, right, make sure you cut off the right hand of everybody on the battlefield, right? If somebody doesn't know the difference between the right and the left, then they're going to cut off all the hands, right? So that's really interesting, right? So after the end of the battle, there's 1,000 people dead, but somebody cuts off all the hands, so that looks like there's 2,000 people dead. Can you see the problem there? Bingo. And in other campaigns, people would cut off the feet, or an arm, right? Yeah. So you can imagine the easiest way of counting how many people died in a battle is to cut the head off. Would you agree? I think you would.
Yeah.
Except trying to work out how many people died on one side, how many people died on the other side. That is the problem, right? So we knew about this throughout history, right? We've always known this as a problem. This is a reason why dog tags came in. We see dog tags, identification dog tags, come in the First World War, and they actually came in wait for it, in the American Civil War, because soldiers, when they're fighting, they want people to know that you're dead, right? You know, your mum wants to know that you died, and so on. So the whole point of the dog tag, if you put a little label around your neck,
No issue.
somebody could come along and say, "Oh, that's Eric. He's dead. He is." Right. So they would take the dog tag off and put it in a bag. Right. Nobody would then know that that body belonged to Eric. Right. So by the First World War, some sold dog tags weren't really issued. They weren't until the Second World War. We know dog tags were being issued by the British Army and the German Army in the Second World War, and most armies in Europe. Not all armies in Europe issued dog tags, and I don't think the all aside, you know, in the conflict in Ukraine, right? There's more than just the Russians and the Ukrainians involved, right? There's people from the Donetsk region, there's people from Georgia involved, right? Now, all those other people, do they actually have dog tags? But when you think about the Second World War, you had two dog tags. One dog tag you'd leave with a body, as you know, and the other dog tag you'd take away. This deals with cutting somebody's head off. So you can imagine after Stalingrad, Stalin decided to have all the heads of the bodies piled up, and then nobody can work out whether they're German or Russian. And there were lots of Russians who actually fought with the Germans. Ukrainians, strangely enough, fought with the Germans at Stalingrad, and actually Ukrainians fought against the Germans at Stalingrad. So this was why dog tags came in. It's a bit ridiculous picking off heads. But there is another practical way. We've done this before, but I don't really think we've done this. So this is sounding really gory now, but it's your own fault. Yeah. One of the things the Native Americans did, the best way of identifying, this is going to be really interesting. The best way of identifying the enemy is to cut their hair off, is to scalp them. Because most of the soldiers at, for example, the Battle of Bighorn would have had blonde hair. And most of the Native Americans had black or dark hair. So by scalping, you could work out that the blonde-headed ones were British, because in fact, at the Battle of Little Bighorn, General Custer had blonde hair, right? So you could identify most of the American soldiers, the United States soldiers, rather than Native Americans, by the hair. So that's a more practical way of working out the dead on the battlefield. That's why they did it. You know, that's because to be honest with you, the last thing, here we go, Evan, we've just won a battle, right? Evan, I know you haven't eaten all day and you haven't even been to the toilet, but can you cut all the heads off? What would you prefer to do, eat or cut people's heads off?
Eat.
Yeah, I'm with that one. You just punched me in the face and you just went for dinner. Thank you. But this is the thing. The last thing you want to be, you don't want to be taking people's heads off. I want a break. I've been killing all day. You know, I've seen 5 of my friends dead, and what you're going to do is just going to cut your mates' heads off as well. You know, yeah. Now this is rather. Do you know one thing I absolutely do love? I do love looking at images like this. Because yeah, it's great. What that guy there is a Russian commander. He's called a Rus, a Russian commander. And there is the one on the carpet there is the Mongolian commander of the battle, on this great Persian rug, and he's coming and he's probably going to be beheaded. Now, if you look at that image there, there's lots of differences in skin color. There's black soldiers there, Mongolian black soldiers that are probably from Arabia who joined the Mongolians. And what you then have is this commander on a horse, and really interesting. Again, I did say that the Mongolian army was made up of people that were from. I didn't actually say this, did I? I said that the army was made up of people with different weapons. When the Mongolian, okay, so you've got a city. It's Baghdad, because they're in Iraq. The Mongolians captured the city of Baghdad, and if some of the Baghdad people said, "Oh, like we'll join your army," right? So you might get people from Baghdad fighting up in Poland, for example. It would have been very, very odd. You know, the faces of the Mongolian army would have been everything, right? Every single color, every single hair, everything, right? This is why it makes it difficult after a battle, to be honest with you, Evan, to try and work out who's on whose side, because the heads could be from anyone. But we do know one thing, that the Mongolians were quite effective on a battlefield. If the Mongolians are going to be the ones who are going to win the battle, they're going to behead everyone, right? I'm on your side. I'm on your side. Well, the Mongolian commander might not be able to understand what the hell you're on about, because he conquered your country 2 years earlier, so he just decides to cut your head off as well. And that's the thing, you see. When you're cutting people's heads off, sorry to sound really brutal, it's a status symbol, isn't it? You've got a massive pile of heads, and it's like makes the victory so important. Yeah. Just don't tell anyone that some of those heads are actually from people who died fighting for your side. Now, this is a Mongolian. You can see this, and this is a Mongolian who's killed a Russian, and he wants his arrow back. You know, or he wants that back because, you know, he needs it the next day to fight, and it's likely that the clothing that Mongolian horseman's wearing, it's likely that the headgear is probably typical Mongolian, but the rest of the outfit he's taken off other people, and there you go, a Russian soldier, a Rus, US, as there he is dead. So what I'm going to do is probably go off the images now and see. Oh, we'll do that later on. And we're going to go off these images, and I just want to tell you a few bits of information, quite gory information, actually. So we'll go off these images. And is this all sounding okay for you today?
Yeah.
We don't have laggy, that's good. Hang on a minute. Let's stop that there. Good. I'm just going to see what time. Hang on. Okay, right. Let's just get some. I'm going to get some facts off the internet. Right. So here we go. So the Mongolian Empire itself lasted from approximately 86, but getting smaller and smaller. And what led, this is interesting, what led to the final decline and annihilation and complete disappearance of the Mongolian Empire was actually the plague, because the Mongolian Empire was really nothing but disappeared by about 1368. Because of the plague, it really had an effect on the armies, because whenever they were conquering, they would come across the plague. And this is another thing. This is the original religion of Genghis Khan, right? This great leader of this huge empire. The original religion was something known as shamanism. And what shamanism is basically, you've got to take a little bit of a paste, and you got a shaman, and he's talking about various things, and you might do a bit of smoking and all these different things, right? It's you go into a different world, and it speaks to you, and that's basically shamanism. It's a bit more complicated than that. There was another religion that was part of the Mongol Empire. It was Buddhism. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Buddhism, but Buddhism is really peaceful, and Buddhism is really chilled out. So what Genghis Khan would have come across, he would have come across Buddhism, and they would have said, "Oh, we're not going to fight you." And Genghis was thinking, "Well, fiddlesticks. If you don't fight us, then what we're going to do?" Buddhism would have been very rich, and what the Buddhists probably said is, here's all this gold, take it. Right? We'll just do our own thing, and that would have probably made them happy. So Buddhism was part of this empire, and also Christianity. Christianity was part of their empire as well, because they would conquer Christian, northern Europe, like Russia, and places like Ukraine and modern day Belarus and all those places, and a bit of Romania. And also part of the Mongolians' way of life was Islam as well. So you had everything, it was everything going on, all part of this Mongol world. They spoke a language known as Middle Mongolian. They spoke Chinese and they spoke Persian. So it was an empire going places. Rather interesting, really good stuff. Now. Here we go. I'm going to mention a few people. Genghis Khan, we've mentioned him. He was the first great Khan leader, 1206 to 1227. So beginning of the 1200s, we got, as I said, we got this empire, and there was his children and his grandchildren, whatever. There was somebody else who was also very, very famous. He was a chap by the name of Kubla Khan. In the year 1260 to 1294. Now, he reigned a long time. He reigned 34 years, Kubla Khan. And then finally, everything disappeared. By 1368, a guy by the name of Timur, he was the last sort of leader of the Mongol Empire. And that was it. It disappeared from history. So they knocked out, they knocked out many empires, really. They knocked out the Persian Empire. They knocked out the Russians for a while. They knocked out lots of the northern Indian empires. They knocked out the Afghanistani Empire. They had fighting with the Japanese. Lots of things really happened, and it was and actually Genghis Khan was the leader, because the people who ruled over the Mongolians said, "Look, Genghis, you're a good bloke." Well, he was a bit gory, to be honest with you. Genghis, you're a good bloke. Can you lead us? And he did. He did a pretty good job. Now, I'm not one for war. I don't. We do lots of these, Evan, and we talk about warfare and so on. But one of the most influential things in human history is warfare. You can't get away from it. I know your dad's really interested in King Arthur, and he really likes Owen Glyndŵr and all the rest of it. That's about warfare. I know you're into Russia and Germany. That's all about warfare, right? It's unfortunately, warfare is the thing that has built society in many ways, and it's quite tragic that we've had to kill and go through the world doing these things. So Mongolia itself, a massive empire, all the way from Japan all the way into Eastern Europe. And they probably, the reason why, you can answer this question, yeah? You've seen that map earlier on, haven't you? That great map that stretched all the way from in China all the way over to Russia, right? But you saw a big area at the top that hadn't been conquered, right? Why would be two reasons why you wouldn't conquer Serbia? Not Serbia, Siberia. Siberia up there, farthest in the eastern part of Russia. Why wouldn't you conquer Siberia?
It's cold and like.
Yeah, that's one. Go on, and one more. It's a bit obvious, actually.
It's mountains.
Yeah, you're close. Give me another reason. It's even more obvious than that.
Russians live up there.
No, yeah, you can deal with the Russians. And they did deal with the Russians. They defeated the Russians lots of times. They occupied lots of Russian cities. The biggest reason is there's not much there. this is this is the German problem in the Second World War. Yeah. If they even tried to conquer Russia, they would keep going into Russia and there'd be nothing for them. Their supply lines would have been so long. By the time they got to Vladivostok, which is on the other side of Russia, the Germans would have basically been wiped out because there was nothing much there. There's this big gap in Russia, right? And it was like the Mongolians were thinking, well, what's the point? What is the point? You know, let's go against Arabia. Let's go again. And it's more fun defeating the Russians after all. And the other thing as well is, I've already said it, yeah? If you've got cities that are saying, right, you're the Mongolians, it's your city. Here's the key to the city. Just walk in, it's fine. And what usually happened is that the Mongols said, well, you've been keeping an eye on the city for a while, right? Make sure you give us food. That's important, yeah? Make sure you give us food and supplies, right? And we'll just leave you alone. And that's exactly, that's what happened in some cases, yeah? You can't do that when you're going into big track. To Siberia. In many ways, if they had kept going, you're still there, yeah?
Yeah.
In many ways, if they had kept going, they could have conquered all of Russia, all of modern day Russia, yeah? They could have conquered all of Arabia. They could have conquered lots of Africa, but it would have been a lot of effort. And they just thought, I can't be asked. Just can't be asked. And anyway, the other thing I want to say is there's a few words we need to talk about. If we don't do King Arthur this week, we'll do it next week, but we'll mention him towards the end. And by the way, we started at 3 minutes past 10. We have got 12 minutes left. Here we go. This is a word that you may have come across, and I know you're probably typing things in. Mongol hordes. Hordes. When you come across the word horde, it's like, you know, you've heard about the horde of zombies. Oh my God, there's a horde of zombies, right? And there's loads of them. And I tell you what, if there's a horde of zombies coming around your car, right, the best thing to do is hide in the car in the boot. Just jump in the boot. That's it. And just let them go by past. That's the best way of dealing with a horde. But usually Mongol hordes, let's get back to reality, not zombies. Mongol hordes themselves were usually not very big, but they were well equipped. And it was only because they would go through territory they got bigger. The word horde often conjured up a misleading image when applied to the Mongols. It brings to mind mindless swarms of disorganized barbarians attacking their enemies in a wild hell for leather charge. Right? It's not true. No, I'm not said that. And overwhelmingly, their foes with numbers and reckless savagery, heedless of the cost. The Mongols certainly were savage in their conduct of war and considered their barbaric treatment of others. It is difficult to contest that they were barbarians. But however, when the Mongols were coming across an enemy, the enemy was usually badly organized. What we do see, the Mongols were a bit like Alexander the Great, but, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, when he's invading and fighting the Persians, right? Alexander the Great's usually outnumbered 10-1. But because of the way Alexander the Great organized his armies, like Genghis Khan in 1206, when Alexander the Great's organizing his armies, say, for example, 330 years BC, like before the birth of Christ, right? He's always outnumbered, but he's able to defeat his enemy. I think Alexander the Great was only defeated maybe once in battle. Don't quote me on that. It's said that Alexander the Great won every single battle, but he may have slightly won a battle against the Indians. That's it. But he won every single battle. Mongols were very much the same. Usually the battles that these people lose, they sort of say, right, we didn't lose that one today. Right, just don't tell anyone. Shh. The Mongols were also, even though it says that they're like barbarians and savage, they were really organized, right? They were actually quite organized. You can be barbarians but they were quite organized because they had like a strict code. You did, right, what I tell you to do, right? That's what they said. And even if you charge at the enemy, hit willy-nilly, right? If you do it in a certain way, you're going to beat the enemy, right? So you discipline everything. Their discipline and professionalism rivaled even that of the Roman legions. Obviously, Rome, the Roman Empire, other than Constantinople, really didn't exist back then, much of an army. But when you compare the two 1,000 years apart, they were pretty, Roman legion 1,000 years before Genghis Khan. You're really well organized. Genghis Khan, but organized in a different way. This is what I'm trying to get at. This is really what I'm trying to get at. You can organize a rabble. Now, it may surprise you, but the Russian army marching into Europe in 1944 was really disorganized. It was all over the place. But there was more of them, and they were disciplined in a different way. Yeah. So you look at this, when the Russians were invading Europe in 1944, you had horsemen, you had tanks, you had armies in different organizations and so on. But when they came at you together, that's when they were able to defeat the Germans and their allies. This is what we're talking about. Very similar to the way Genghis Khan organized. As long as you listen to being told what to do, you can win a battle. You can win a battle. I don't know if you know anything about the Battle of Waterloo, right? The Battle of Waterloo in 1815, it's likely that Napoleon could have won that battle if one of his generals had done exactly what he told him to do, General Ney. General Ney decided to do cavalry charges at British squares, nearly succeeded, but it used up Napoleon's available cavalry. And it was something that Napoleon didn't want to happen. So Ney did something different in the battle, which probably led to Napoleon's defeat. So that's a really interesting point. It was strict and professional, the Mongolian army, more than anything else, that won the Mongol victories. No matter how disorganized you are, as long as you listen to discipline, as long as you listen to the rules, you can win. The Mongols seldom had numerical superiority over their enemy. And after all, the Mongols were actually marching into battle on their stomachs. I don't know if you've ever heard this, right? But an army marches on its stomach. That's a very famous quote. Now, I do believe that's either a quote of General Sherman from 1863, or it's either a quote of Napoleon or Wellington. You can look this up on the internet. An army marches on its stomach. If you've got a large army, you can't feed it, it's no good. If you've got a small army and you can feed it and the morale's good, then you could defeat any enemy. Indeed, they swept across Eurasia, Europe, and Asia and conquered history's largest empires at the time. In their rise to empire, the Mongols routinely annihilated opposing armies that outnumbered them by 2, 3, or even 4 to 1. Relying on the idea of strategy, tactics, not superiority, training and discipline and speed, the Mongols won despite being outnumbered and the underdogs. This is what happened. The enemy thought they're not going to beat us, but they did, because the Mongols usually had better weapons and a variety of weapons, as we've already said. They consistently beat bigger opponents, adding up all the preceding results. The Mongols were probably one of the greatest fighting machines ever in history, right? When we talk about the second, okay, then you know the answers to these questions. I hope you're going to give me the right answers. Which country had the biggest army at the start of the Second World War?
France.
Yes, correct. By the that's brilliant. You've answered that. Which was the better equipped army in 1945, the Russians or the Germans?
The Germans.
Yeah, but they didn't have the men to use the weaponry that they had. You are dead right. You are very right there. So if you think about all that, if you think about if the Germans were really more disciplined and well organized towards the end of the war, right? And they knew they had everything coordinated really well. the Germans wouldn't have won, but they would have been a better match for the Russians. And it's the same with Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was able to defeat bigger enemies. So the other thing as well is when the Mongols decided to go against the Ying dynasty of China in 1211, the Mongols were outnumbered by the Chinese, but they defeated the Chinese. And what the Mongols also did, they used fear. They used fear on the battlefield. Or when the enemy surrendered, they massacred every single one of them. Every single one, right? And they piled up the heads. And the Chinese emperor, the Yin emperor of China, saw this, and basically decided to run away. So he abandoned the whole of the north of China to the Mongols. Genghis then found himself ruling a domain that included tens of millions of Chinese peasants. The concept of civilized government was alien to him, so he planned to simply kill them all. He was going to kill every single Chinese person. He was going to kill them all initially, right? But that wouldn't have worked. So this is why Genghis Khan in 1211 came up with the idea of Pax Mongolia. So he basically decided to spare the Chinese of being wiped out, and he decided to use the peasants, the Chinese peasants, because they were now within his empire. Instead of killing them all, they were going to provide the food for the armies of Genghis Khan. Campaigning in China was interrupted by another empire. And what happened is that the Mongols had to go against other empires. And it was all this thing. What they were going to do, they were going to conquer all of China, but they decided to sort of fight against people in Iran and all the rest of it. So they decided to fight them instead. What happened is that when they were fighting other empires, those that resisted were wiped out. They just killed them all. But if they surrendered, then Genghis Khan realized they could build quite a big empire, thinking about his idea of Pax Mongolia. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you one key fact, right? And then we're going to call it a day, because I think we've done I think we've done very, very well. I think so we'll look at King Arthur next week, if that's okay with you. And right, there's lots of little facts here. I just want to get one that's going to stick in our mind. I'm just scrolling through this now because I've got a big list here. And here we go. Right, hang on. Just there's so many interesting facts here. Right, the Mongols themselves made people in Europe realize that there was another world. I know that sounds really strange. When you think about it, people who lived in Europe with Christianity, they thought we are the only people on the planet. But the Mongols helped people in Europe to realize there's other things going on. There's other people you can trade with, right? And this was the idea that people in Europe actually feared the Mongolians, and that they feared that the Mongols would actually take over Europe. But at the same time, Islam was growing big in Europe, but eventually the Mongols disappeared slowly started after 1368, and the only people actually really into going against Europe would have actually been the Muslims. So what we're going to do, I wanted to bring you that this week, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of an image, homework as it were. And a little bit of homework we got here is we've got this image.
Yeah.
There we go. Will we see the image?
Yeah.
Right. You've got to watch. This is your homework for next week. You've got to watch Monty Python's Holy Grail for next week. And we're going to be definitely looking at King Arthur next week, because that's what we're going to be doing part of this week. And I want you to actually watch that film with your dad. And by the end of it, I want you to ask your dad, happened. Be surprised at things in the Holy Grail that may have happened. And that's what you've got to do. So you've got to sit down and watch that with your dad. Monty Python's Holy Grail. And that is the guy in the front. And that is that is Graham Chapman that guy in front, Graham Chapman. So that's what you need to watch. That's your homework for next week. So have you got any questions for me this week? Any question?
No.
All right then. Was that of use this week? Was that of interest?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay then. Well, I'll hopefully see you next week if you're not down the caravan, and if not, it's just going to be Stab.
I'm down next week.
All right. Well, tell your dad to let me know. You haven't got any other questions for this week, no?
No.
All right then. Well, in that case, I will maybe see you next week. If not, I'll see you the week after.
Okay, bye.
Okay then. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Okay.
Two. My pleasure. Right, anyone who watched that today, don't forget to like and subscribe. My nose is looking really big. It usually does when the sun's out. Thank you very much for watching this. I need a ready shave. I can't be asked. Anyway, speak to you soon, guys. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like.